Sport by Ford, Formula One's most successful team. Hitachi. Elf Oil, world champion. And Goodyear.
Hello and welcome here on Eurosport. Welcome to the first qualifying session for the 65th Italian Grand Prix. 12 laps per driver in the next 60 minutes. But this morning we've had 2 times 45 minutes already, and Damon Hill, the 1993 winner of the Italian Grand Prix, was fastest. Then Gerhard Berger, the only other Grand Prix winner in the field, or Italian Grand Prix winner that is. David Coulthard, third on his first visit to Monza in a Formula One car. Johnny Herbert, delighted with the new Honda Mugen engine in the back of a Lotus, was fourth. And Mark Blundell, despite a quick spin, John, was fifth. A very good top 5, with Frentzen sixth.
Well, Monza lived up to its reputation on Thursday, in fact, with torrential rain, and the legacy of that rain remained here for Friday morning, because the circuit generally wet all round at the start of the 1.5-hour session. It gradually dried out, and that 15-minute gap between the two parts of that session gave teams an opportunity to rethink what they want to do. And of course, here at Monza, changes to the circuit. First of all, in the flat-out Curva Grande, that corner, the description is it's a tighter corner, but in fact I think what they mean is that the corner's been brought closer to the inside than previously before. But more significantly, round at Lesmo 2, the second of the Lesmo curves, previously just about flat out in 5th gear, now heavy brake, down to 3rd gear, very much allowed like Copse Corner at Silverstone, the revised Copse Corner. Drivers happier with the change, principally because they say it gives them more margin in the event of error where still mechanical failure. It has changed the face of this very famous Monza circuit a great deal, but ultimately it's going to be a race as ever at Monza, and it's going to be exciting.
Changes to the circuit, changes in the cockpit as well here at Monza. It's a Grand Prix without the leader of the World Championship, Michael Schumacher. He's sitting out a 2-race ban and being replaced by JJ Leto, the Finn. Yannick Dalmas is in for Philippe Alliot or Olivier Beretta. At Le Rousse, trying to qualify for his 23rd Grand Prix. And that is the new drivers, or different drivers in cars, and of course the new engine, mentioned it before, in the back of Johnny Herbert's Lotus. Well, the new boys, how did they do? Yannick Dalmas, he spun and ended up 23rd, and JJ Leto saying he was a little bit rusty and sliding back into 17th. Also not very happy with the balance of his Benetton.
And I think Benetton's really missing greatly the presence of Michael Schumacher and the influence that he brings to the team, and in fact the relationship that exists between the driver and the engineers. And it's an unspoken relationship. They know precisely what he requires of the car, and he knows precisely what they can give him. And Benetton way down in terms of the usual positions. Later was 17th, and Jos Verstappen 22nd, so they were not, for the first time in a very long time, the quickest of the Ford engine runners here this weekend.
So, pole position last year, a 1:21.179. I don't think we're going to make that with all the new corners on the circuit, especially the new Lesmo this morning. Damon Hill, a 1:25.859. The only driver to get into the 1:25 seconds. Then Gerhard Berger at 26.602. Coulthard 27.062. Johnny Herbert 27.472. But John, Damon Hill's fastest lap in the race last year was a 1:23.575. That, maybe with a bit rubber down, could be the target for tomorrow afternoon.
Well, the circuit is still very green, and we just saw, in fact, as Belmondo comes up to the Ascari chicane, we saw the first sight of the revised Lesmo curve. I think that at 1:23 is just about possible. the conditions this morning, although it was a damp track, drying, and there David Brabham already in trouble in his first run in his Simtech Ford, and well, confusion whether are they going to get him out or what's going on. It looks simply as if he's just pulled off the circuit, but let's have a look and see as David Brabham is coming down into one of the chicanes. And there we have a very familiar sight. The back end breaks away. The car hops, skips and jumps over the racetrack into the grass. And in fact, well, David had completed 1 and 2 laps, the quickest of which was 1:43.694, and that looks to me the end of his afternoon, and he will be praying for a fine day on Saturday.
There's Paul Belmondo, now the only driver on the circuit. Belmondo, who's qualified in 2 Grand Prix only this year, that's Monaco and Spain. He retired in both of the races he qualified. A man that's raced in more Grand Prix than this year. He raced, of course, for March in 1992, where he had his debut Grand Prix in Spain, and he will try and qualify for his 8th Grand Prix. Well, there's the car of David Brabham being towed away, and there's damage to that car now, I think.
Yeah, he clipped the right rear against the barrier, broke one of the suspension arms, and clearly that is the end of it for David Brabham with that car. Of course, he has the option to sprint back to the pits. Where he is in relation to the pits is about maybe half a kilometre at most, and he can get back there within this Monza circuit. It is in fact a public park, lots of roads, so plenty of enthusiastic Italians with Vespas, scooters, hooligans basically, will be delighted to bring David back to the pits, and I'm sure that Simtech will give him the opportunity to drive Jean-Marc Gounod's car after Gounod has had his 12-lap run.
And there we see the Monza Park from the helicopter. That, in fact, is the Parabolica, the last corner before you get onto the main straight. And, John, there are a lot of long straights on this corner. It's a bit of a straight chicane and another spurt.
And that, the Parabolica, in my mind, is the last great corner here on the Monza circuit, with the change to not so much Curva Grande, because it was basically flat out, and all you did was just steer the car through it. But the second Lesmo curve used to be a very, very big challenge indeed, and because of the nature of the circuit, the very long straights, in fact this is the most demanding circuit for engines. The length of time you are full throttle here is greater than in any other circuit, so you've got a funny setup of a car, low downforce for good top speed. Of course you sacrifice it in those chicanes. So Parabolica for me, a great corner. The speed entering it is around about 200 kilometers per hour. But once you've made your apex, you let the car run way, way wide out to the very verge. And this morning, Alesi, when the track was still partially damp, was right on the very, very edge. Great to watch, very exciting, and he was, at that point, the quickest man on the circuit.
Well, on the right, you see Gerhard Berger, and on the left, Niki Lauda. Of course, Berger, winner of the German Grand Prix in Hockenheim, and winner of the Italian Grand Prix back in 1988. This is a man that was very quick earlier on this morning. Oliver Panis ended up 9th in the end on the 1:28.092, complaining of traffic on his fast runs, but Panis was a regular top 5 visitor this morning, so he could be in for a surprise, maybe, John, well inside the top 10.
Well, all the changes that have taken place at Ligier since the acquisition by Benetton are obviously beneficial, and Panis, a young man, his first season in Grand Prix racing this year, has been one of the revelations. He's been in the top 5 more or less throughout that 1.5-hour session. He did get caught out at the end of the session, but in reality the times this morning, while it's gratifying, it's nice to be top of the list, be quickest, Panis knows what he's capable of, and the improvements with Frank Durney now making his return to the Ligier Renault team, Cesare Fiorio, let's say masterminding the whole act, is beginning to come through on the track.
The 93 Formula 3000 champion on a race-by-race basis at Ligier at the beginning of the year, but he's justified the decision on taking that seat. Best qualifying performance was in Hungary, where he qualified 9th, and of course that best finish came in Hockenheim, where he finished 2nd, just in front of teammate Eric Bernard.
Well, there's a man on the track now who caused, I think, the greatest excitement during the morning session. That's Johnny Herbert. in his Lotus with the new Mugen Honda V10 engine, and that's an engine that no one is allowed to look at. As soon as the car comes into the garage, they close the doors down. It is only for the eyes of the Honda engineers, the Mugen Honda engineers, and for the Lotus team. Well, there's the first split-second segment time. Belmondo previously the quickest, and that's no big surprise that Panis has taken lumps out of that segment time. But Johnny Herbert, I think, really surprised everybody by the speed of his fourth quickest lap. The Lotus team had been telling everybody after a very successful test at Silverstone some 3 weeks ago that the new engine and the benefits it brings to the Lotus chassis are about 2 to 2.5 seconds. Everybody said, yeah, we have heard those stories before. Well, the truth was there for everybody, and there is Johnny Herbert and Olivier Panis behind him now, 4.5 seconds quicker than Paul Belmondo. But I think when this lap of Panis is complete, I would like to see us watch what Johnny Herbert is doing, because he is going to be the sleeper of the weekend.
Well, Panis completes this lap. Johnny Herbert right in front of him. Panis 28.655, and that is actually 0.6 slower than he managed this morning. So maybe on the next run, John, we saw this morning as well that the second and third lap were usually quicker than the first flying lap.
Well, Goodyear have got their AA compound tyre for this race. That's the only tyre choice available in a dry configuration. You see just in the background Panis coming up to another overtake. He's going to try and get himself ahead of Johnny Herbert, who will also be and a wobble from Johnny as he turned into Lesmo 1. Well, he's got to contain himself, because he did have a little momentary off this morning as well. So Herbert in the Lotus with the new Mugen Honda V10, Panis with the Renault V10, both engines very powerful, and in fact the difference in horsepower between Mugen Honda and Renault, I would say, very, very close now indeed.
30 years of age, Johnny Herbert, best qualifying position ever is 6th. He did that in Canada and Japan 1992, and he's finished 4th 4 times in his career and has never been on the rostrum. But maybe with this new engine in the back of that Lotus 109, the engine, John, it's a lighter, it's a bit more powerful, but the team, Johnny, everybody says it's the weight, and the fact that the weight is so much more down is a big improvement. At 28.2, that is 0.8 of a second slower than Johnny did last year. Oliver Panis is now quickest on a 1:27.4. There we see him. Then it's Mika Hakkinen, a 1:27.668 in second. Johnny Herbert is third. Alessandro Zanardi is fourth. But we haven't seen Ferraris or Williams yet on the circuit. This is the man currently top of the list, chasing Johnny Herbert. There he is, Oliver Panis.
Well, clearly Panis, the quicker of the two cars on screen, and you can see that he's getting closer and closer to Johnny Herbert into this second Lesmo. It's a third gear corner, but really hard on it in third gear, just at the exit fourth gear. And by the time they get up to the third chicane, the Ascari chicane, or the Aloni as the corner used to be called before there was any chicane, the top speed compared to last year is not that dissimilar.
So Mika Hakkinen goes top of the list, a 1:27.388 for the Finn, which is an improvement of 0.9 of a second over this morning. So Mika on a charge very much. Panis is second, Herbert is third, then Alessandro Zanardi in fourth position, just ahead of Belmondo, Brabham and Morbidelli. We'll be back after the break here on Eurosport. There's Oliver Panis, the blue car in the middle of your screen, being pushed back into the garage. He is currently fastest, and that is after 15 minutes into the first qualifying session for Sunday's Italian Grand Prix. We've had 9 cars out on the circuit so far, with Panis, Hakkinen, Herbert and Zanardi is the top 4. This is a local boy, Johnny Morbidelli. Oops, and that's very wild over the curbs, John.
Well, he's trying to shortcut the circuit, but in doing so you lose downforce, you unsettle the car, and with a relatively hard tyre compound, you're going to lose a bit of grip. But of course, being Italian and Italy and the pressure on the Italian drivers prior to this Grand Prix and during the period when there was dispute about it being held at all. They all wanted to come and race here. It is such an important event in the life of Italian Formula One stars.
Gianni Morbidelli, who lives in Pesaro in Italy, raced for Dallara, Minardi, Ferrari, and again for Minardi, and now with the Arrows team. Finished 5th in Germany. That's his best Grand Prix result to date and his best qualifying he had earlier in the year in Brazil, where he qualified 6th. But John, the footwork team, they were very quick earlier on in the year, but they've slipped back a little bit.
They seem for some reason to have lost out more than other teams when we had the major revisions to aerodynamics. At the start of the year, this car was, I think, the car that most engineers in the pits thought really was one of the nicest designs, both in terms of the actual design and the execution of it. But somehow or other, they've not managed to maintain the change and the progress that other teams have been going through. And so they've been lingering down in the sort of the 10 to 20 position in qualifying, and then really suffering very much, because when you start so far down, the progress that you are unable to make in the early laps does hurt you.
So Gianni Morbidelli, one of the funniest characters in the Formula One paddock, John. Always joking, always very, very nice guy. We stayed in the same hotel as he did in Spa. And I must say, Gianni, a very nice person.
Well, he always talks about Mercedes-Benz and girls. I don't know what it is about the two interests in his life, and also he talks about his mammy quite a lot too. But he is a very nice guy, very friendly, very open, and well, he's untouched, let's say, by the success that does come to those that reach the headier heights in Formula One.
Former world sports car champion Yannick Dalmas, a championship he won in 1992 together with Derek Warwick. The year they also won Le Mans. Of course, he won Le Mans earlier this year in that Dower Porsche. So Yannick Dalmas making a return to Formula One racing. He's never scored a point. He scored a 5th place in Australia back in 1987, but the Lola team then only entered one car, and that was teammates Philippe Alliot's car. So although he did have a 5th place, he never scored any points for it.
Well, Yannick Dalmas really came out of Formula 3000 as the great hope of France. He was meant to be the successor to Alain Prost, and then he got an illness, and that kept him out of racing for a very long time, and it took him quite a long time to try to regain the ground that he had lost. And in fact, I think he has never made it back to the point before his illness. He also, here at Monza in 92, in that 3rd chicane, had a massive accident when they were leading the race. Rolled his Peugeot end over end, and that didn't help. I think confidence, it's a word we've used a lot through this year, and it really is, in the case of Yannick Dalmas, a loss of confidence, and the process that he needs to go through to regain it, he's not having the opportunity, but he's not maybe convincing people of the chance to give him that opportunity. Sort of catch-22 situation for Yannick Dalmas, but certainly a man of great speed and ability.
A man also who should be in this car for the next 3 Grand Prix, as far as we can find out. And he loves a good bottle of Bordeaux. Currently in 6th position, 3.4 seconds behind the man that's still on provisional pole, Yannick Dalmas, after 19 minutes into the first qualifying session. Hakkinen, Herbert, Zanardi, Morbidelli and Dalmas currently the top 6. But we are waiting basically for the red cars with numbers 27 and 28, and the blue and white ones with the numbers 0 and 2. But this is Andrea de Cesaris, while leaving the pit lane at the moment, is that white Tyrrell Yamaha of Mark Blundell. And John, you think, and I think many people think, that Yamaha could be a joker in the pack here in Monza.
Well, they've been very, very good all year, and they've been improving all year. But looking back, for example, at Hockenheim, and Ukio Katayama, very, very impressive performance indeed. Here it is a power circuit. Yamaha have got a revised V10 engine yet again, which is specifically tailored to the requirements of the Monza circuit, and that's just basically horsepower. You can get around the slower parts of the circuit, but you've just got to be able to eat lumps out of the straights here, because that's where A, your time will be made up, but secondly, where all the overtaking is going to take place. If you can't get alongside an opposing car prior to coming up to the corner, you're not going to be able to get past. So Mark Blundell and Ukiya Katayama, I think, look forward here at Monza to A, very good qualifying position, but secondly, the reliability and performance that they believe they've got for possibly a podium opportunity, but certainly points.
Well, John, if we look down the list, there's a good performance from Jean-Marc Gounon. He's currently 6th, or 7th now, with the Cesaris going in 6th, but the time, 1:29.902, that was good enough for 19th place this morning, so a promising result from Gounon. Panis, Hakkinen, Herbert, we've got some 37 minutes left. Please rejoin us after the break. Back here on Eurosport, you're watching two Benettons and David Brabham in Jean-Marc Gounon's car. After shunting his own, Gounon is 21st, so David has got the chance of qualifying with his teammate's car. Verstappen into the pits, Leto starting a run, which is actually his first run, because he's back in 27th position and never really completed the lap. David Brabham now 25th, and JJ Leto starting a run. There we see him, the white wheels and the orange on his Benetton. His first Grand Prix since Canada, and a little rusty, he said, but very fit.
And you can just see JJ working very hard indeed, coming through that first chicane. And I'm not really convinced that he's still fully comfortable with the Benetton Ford. We've seen prior to his accident, and then of course post the accident, the style that Michael Schumacher likes, the way he wants his car set up. It's very difficult for anybody else in the team to drive the car in that way, and the car looked to me not to be comfortable, or certainly JJ Leto doesn't look comfortable driving this car right now.
Leto following David Brabham into the third and fastest chicane, the Variante Ascari, one of the great Italian drivers that won the Italian Grand Prix for Ferrari back in the early 50s.
Alberto Ascari was one of the greats of Grand Prix racing, and in fact it was at this circuit that he, in a rather, I would call it almost unimportant sports car test, lost his life. And it for Italian motorsport in the 50s was, I think, absolutely tragic.
Leto crossing the line, 28.241. He will move up to page 1 of the Tag Heuer Olivetti screen, and David Brabham is now 26th. David, 25th, sorry, just ahead of Bertrand Gachot and Paul Belmondo. So even when Martini goes quicker, Brabham should be in so far. But there's another day to go, and of course there's 20 minutes to go in this session, with Damon Hill still fastest, Alesi second, Berger third, fourth David Coulthard, fifth Johnny Herbert. That's the man.
And it's well timed as well, because Eddie Irvine has come onto the circuit when virtually the entire field are sitting in the pits deciding what is the right time to go out. But this man has chosen the right time to go out, and he ought to have an entirely clear circuit, at least for this lap, and maybe hopefully for the ones that follow.
It's Eddie's 8th flying lap out of a possible 12 you have per driver, and I wonder, John, whether Eddie would give his car to teammate Rubens Barrichello when he finishes his laps, but he was very wide on that in midway through that chicane.
Yeah, lucky to get away with that. The back end again stepped out, and you can see on the Jordan how little rear wing they're running. They don't have the horsepower of Renault or Ferrari, or for that matter now the new Honda Mugen engine or Mugen Honda engine, so they've got to find the balance between handling and straight line speed by reducing the downforce. And you can see just how little rear wing the Jordans are carrying.
Eddie Irvine, I think, getting some...
Well, he's abandoned the lap. He's I think, just literally cleaning the tyres up, something not happy about. So he's decided that this lap, there was an error in the first chicane. I've compromised myself. And he wasn't happy with it, so he's just decided to prepare. And now out of the third chicane, down to the Parabolica, get your act right. Don't rush into the corner as you would do in a flying lap, but get on the power really early and get the drive off the corner to ensure the maximum speed as you come across start-finish line and then down into that first chicane.
Eddie Irvine, the man that nearly won Le Mans this year for Toyota, of course had a ban, 3-race ban earlier in the year, but Eddie, very much a Grand Prix driver these days, in 10th position, very much more tidy through that chicane now. Let's hope he doesn't get any traffic. But Irvine, I think he's recently moved to Dublin, John, and enjoying every minute of being back in Ireland.
Well, Dublin is a very social city, and I think it's a great place to live. So Eddie Irvine in Dublin and commuting to the UK for testing, and then of course from there onto the various venues around the world.
"18 minutes left in this first qualifying session for Sunday's Italian Grand Prix." And while we're talking about Sunday's Grand Prix, don't forget it starts an hour later than normal. 3 o'clock if you're on the continent, 2 o'clock when you're in the UK for that matter. So 1 hour later than the other European Grand Prix. The Italian Grand Prix, the 65th Italian Grand Prix, and it's being held at Monza with Damon Hill and Jean Alesi on the provisional front row. But what can Gerhard Berger do about that? Gerhard Berger on his second run. Eddie Irvine we saw crossing the line, improving to 7th position. Well done, Eddie. 1:26.665, 1.9 seconds away from pole.
Well, let's expect to see a maximum attack from Gerhard Berger, and he has got a front or a forward mounted camera. We saw shots this morning. We in fact saw Gerhard take his trip across one of the gravel beds. But I can assure you that Berger, presently third quickest, and some 0.8 of a second slower than provisional poleman Damon Hill, will be very committed indeed. The honour of being the quickest Ferrari driver is almost as great as being on pole position here at Monza. Berger wants to be the quickest Ferrari driver.
Unnoticed maybe, but the black Sauber Mercedes, number 30, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, is still in 6th position. I think, John, they've got the benefit of Monza being their nominated circuit to go testing. But still, Heinz-Harald, 6th, teammate to Cesaris back in 11th. But I think we've discovered quite a few new names in Formula One this year, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen, amongst others, is one of them.
And that's a name that's on many other teams, competitive teams, names, drivers that they would like to have. They always make a little note of those people that they think are the coming drivers, not just for the following year, but they look 3 to 5 years these days. And it's not unusual for a young driver, Jos Verstappen being a case in point, where you've got not just a multi-year contract, it almost goes through till he gets his bus pass. It's such a long time. He is committed to the Benetton Ford team.
Gerhard Berger takes us round Curva Grande. We're watching it from the front of his Ferrari underneath the bridge. This is where he went wrong this morning. He turned in and then took a trip across the grapple. Now he just bounces off the curves.
Well, into Lesmo 1, still a great corner. One of those corners, it is slightly banked. The tendency is the car wants to understeer, so you try to pitch the car in. Of course, then the back end doesn't like that very much. Still a very demanding and challenging corner. Lesmo 2, which we've just left, well, it's a corner. I think that's where I would leave it.
Through the Variante Ascari, the third chicane as we call it. The chicane where it all went wrong for the Ferrari drivers during the last qualifying last year.
Of course, that chicane is, I was going to say, a recent addition. It's been there for some 20 years now, but I remember racing on the Monza circuit when there was no chicane where the third chicane is these days in Formula 2, and it was just one blast from the Lesmo 2 all the way down to Parabolica. That's in the Formula 2 days, of course.
Is that the days when Peter Gethin won that very quick Grand Prix here, John?
Indeed, Gethin, Ronnie Peterson, Francois Savert, Mike Hailwood, enormous battle in 1971. Peter Gethin, his sole Grand Prix victory, and one of the victories that BRM were very proud to have taken.
So Damon Hill is still on the provisional pole, while Jean Alesi is out on the circuit attacking that pole position as well. Gerhard Berger has improved to 1:25.148. That's 0.4 of a second away from the Williams Renault driver. David Coulthard still in 4th. Johnny Herbert in 5th. Frentzen 6th, Irvine 7th. And with Herbert, Frentzen and Irvine there, John, I think we've got a bit of a Japanese connection, because all three of them did drive in the Japanese Formula 3000 Championship. There we see Herbert, Frentzen 1.63 and 1.67 seconds away from pole. There's Irvine.
Yes, and Gerhard Berger coming up to complete his 8th lap. He improved on the 7th lap, but not sufficiently to put him onto the provisional front row. Using even the slipstream of Christian Fittipaldi, pulling into the pit lane. Risky thing to do, but that's what you have to do sometimes if you're looking for those vital tenths.
Eddie Irvine moves back into the pits. His 12 laps are over, and I will not be surprised to see teammate Rubens Barrichello in that car very soon. Gerhard Berger improved yet again, now to a 1:24.915. He is only 18 hundredths of a second away from Damon Hill now. He's getting closer, but he hasn't beat him yet.
Well, this is the 3rd run on the 2nd set of tyres, but Gerhard Berger has to make a judgment. Do I go into the pits and take yet another fresh set of tyres, or am I going to take the risk? Maybe with traffic, maybe I have used this set of tyres to the maximum effect. And there's his teammate, the man who wants to put himself back onto the front row of the grid, Jean Alesi.
Well, we watched Alesi's Ferrari go through the second Lesmo. Mika Hakkinen's dropped back all the way down to 13th. John, that's not where he wants to be. We haven't seen Luigi Martini out on the circuit yet, but it's an interesting top 10, I would say, with Hill, Berger, Alesi, Coulthard, Herbert, Frentzen and Irvine.
Well, by that second segment time, it looks like Jean Alesi may well be en route to going back onto the front row of the grid, because it was only thousandths slower than the quickest man we've seen to date, Damon Hill, and now it's this final desperate charge out of Parabolica across start-finish line, and he has done it. Alesi provisionally quickest, Damon Hill by 0.41 thousandths of a second. Well, you couldn't measure it on a stopwatch. It is literally about a foot, less than a foot in terms of distance over a 5.3 kilometer circuit.
Alesi, the number 27 Ferrari, the man from Avignon, back on the front row, and now being quicker than his own best, but I think he's lost that 10th. They're coming out of that chicane where he had a bit of a wobble. The man that still needs that first victory. He's finished 2nd so many times in his career, but he hasn't actually won a race so far yet.
Well, the man that ought to have won many, many Grand Prix, and he's placed his trust implicitly in Ferrari. They have not delivered. Jean Alesi never stops trying.
John, I wonder what's going to happen. It's 12 laps in the afternoon session. Well, Eddie Irvine on our computer is on 13 laps, and the sanction for that is being disqualified, isn't it? Usually, I'm not sure about it, but that's...
Well, not only has he done 13 laps, he is actually still on the circuit. He's making his way back to the pits. That is a responsibility that lies with the team to advise the driver of the maximum laps he has available, and according to our computer, Irvine has exceeded it. So we will have to wait and see whether that will mean the times from this session will be null and void.
Or maybe they...
Well, there Yannick Dalmas in his outing with the Rouge Ford, and again you see once the back of the car breaks away, Dalmas recognises not much I can do with it. He puts the brakes on to try and bring the whole thing to a halt, gets off the track onto the grass, and everybody behind him wondering, what is this guy doing?
Yannick Dalmas is on his way back into the pits anyway, because he's done 12 laps. Damon Hill is on his 8th lap, currently 400ths of a second behind Jean Alesi. 0.041 to be exact is the difference. Gerhard Berger is 3rd, David Coulthard 4th, Johnny Herbert 5th, Frentzen 6th, with 8 minutes and 40 seconds to go in this first qualifying session for Sunday's Italian Grand Prix. And what a session this has been. It's been a cracker, and I think if we can keep this momentum up, John, tomorrow will be even better. There'll be more rubber down. The cars will be better suited to the circuit. So we're going to have an amazing qualifying session tomorrow.
Well, what we're seeing is an Italian Grand Prix at Monza. The atmosphere just generates the kind of performances we're seeing. As a driver, I'm sure there's not one guy here who doesn't feel boosted or inspired by what Monza stands for, what it represents. And there, Rubens Barrichello, whether this is his own car or Irvine's car, well, I suspect it might be his own car. The damage looked to be limited very much just to the upper wishbone and the push rod, and assuming there was no other damage we're not aware of, I think that Barrichello and the Jordan team would like to get him out in his own car.
This man is very definitely in his own car. Damon Hill. Can he win the Italian Grand Prix again? The thing, of course, with Damon is that the deficit with World Championship leader Michael Schumacher is 21 points. Well, Schumacher is not here for 2 races, so if Damon can win them both, we go to Jerez for the European Grand Prix with a 1-point difference and 3 races to go in this year's Formula 1 World Championship. So that is going to be an interesting fact as well. But first, it's Friday afternoon qualifying, and it's traffic, an Italian traffic jam. Damon is 0.4 slower than Alesi at that point.
And the worst thing for Damon Hill is not only is he down on time on this lap on Jean Alesi, there is traffic ahead of him. Now, some of it's going into the pits. The Pacific is not going to be a problem for him. He pulls out passes literally. Look, Belmondo can't even stay in the slipstream. But for Damon Hill, now on his 10th lap, well, he's going to have to find time somewhere. And with traffic on the circuit, and the circuit will become busier in these closing moments of this first qualifying session here on Friday afternoon, Damon is under his own pressure.
Damon and Michele Alboreto, but Damon Hill very close to Jean Alesi, 0.39. Now, can he keep the momentum going? Can he be quicker than the Ferrari between the first and second intermediate times? Or has he backed off? He has
backed off, yes. So clearly he backed off before he decided to enter into the first of the 2 Lesmo corners. Either he's looking for a gap on the circuit, he doesn't want to catch up to Alboreto at a point where he is not able to get through. And I suspect that is the case, because this is his 10th lap and he will have 2 remaining. So as you see, Belmondo suddenly beginning to close down on Damon Hill. That is because Damon has backed off, now preparing to enter the Parabolica. He will enter it at a lower speed than he would in a racing lap, but he will pick up the power earlier and go into the pit lane.
So Damon Hill, I'm not sure he can get out and do one more flying lap if he wants to, John.
Well, maybe here's a problem that we're not clear about, because it seemed to me that if he decided just to linger back, let Alboreto get sufficiently ahead, then he would certainly have the option to do 2 more laps. But now his options are very much closed down, and in effect it looks to me as if Alesi's provisional pole by a 1/10 of a second, or half a 1/10 of a second, is pretty safe, certainly from Damon Hill. The only other man may possibly put himself into contention, Damon Hill's teammate David Coulthard. His last lap was his quickest lap, 1:24.926, and he has 3 remaining laps.
1 more remaining lap for Johnny Herbert in 5th. 3 laps for Coulthard, 3 for Berger, 1 I think for Damon, and 2 for Jean Alesi, the man we're watching, the man on provisional pole position. In the background we see the Benetton of Jos Verstappen. Verstappen currently in 15th position, and it's his first visit to the Monza circuit. Teammate JJ Leto is in 18th position for that matter. But Alesi, his first flying lap on that set of tyres, is now starting. So Alesi will be all or nothing on this lap.
Well, this ought to be rather special. Alesi's first flying lap on this set of tyres was a slow 1:31.041, and that was just a lap to ease himself in, not murder the tyre. And already almost 0.2 of a second quicker at the first intermediate point. Rubens Barrichello ahead of him, and he will be right up against the rear of the Jordan Hart as they come into Parabolica.
Alesi going up to the second intermediate point. Barrichello, is he moving over for the Ferrari? There's a Sauber and woof.
Well, that was emphatic. You saw Jean Alesi decide, Barrichello, if he's not going to make way, I'm going to make way myself. And there, traffic all over the place. Bernard way off to the right. Martin Brundle in the McLaren Peugeot. Now, remember what happened in Belgium 2 weekends ago. Martin and Jean Alesi had a major talk in. I think it was actually almost on the point of blows. Alesi was 0.2 faster than his previous lap at that second intermediate time.
He's got a good slipstream. He's got a good slipstream, but well, he's improved by 0.05 of a second, Jean Alesi. Now, is this going to be a trouble-free lap for Alesi? Well, traffic is the name of the game at the moment. The times are all over the place. People that were running in a 24-second, 25 are now 28 and higher. So I think traffic is playing a major part. I'm sure traffic is playing a major part with 2 minutes to go in this exciting session.
Well, there's no doubt that last lap for Alesi was compromised, not just by Martin Brundle, but by the fact that there was a lot of cars on the circuit all around Parabolica. Clear lap now for Alesi, ought to see an improvement.
Herbert, there we see 5th, Frentzen 6th, behind Alesi, Hill, Berger, Coulthard and Mika Hakkinen on his last flying lap. Well done, Mika. A 1:26.004. Hakkinen up to 5th position, just in front of his former teammate Johnny Herbert. Both have run out of laps, and well, we're trying to find Rubens Barrichello. He's on page 2, 21st position. That is not where we want to be. Alesi, a very good lap indeed. He's got a slipstream. Is he going to get into 23? Oh, he's not. An improvement again, but again with hundredths of a second. A 1:24.620, and I think that will be overnight pole position here in Monza.
And John Alesi, as he came into the first chicane, hand already out acknowledging the cheers all around the circuit for that supreme effort, and undoubtedly he will be a man that will bring in thousands of people here for Saturday qualifying.
I don't know when he did it, but that's by the way, Eric Bernard having a spin on a place where you don't really want to have a spin, coming out of the Variante Ascari, or is it Oliver Panis? I think it's Panis for that matter, but a spin where you don't want to spin. Anyway, and there's someone off, and that's Ukio Katayama off in the Lesmo. That's the first of the 2 Lesmos. Ukio Katayama backwards into the barrier there, and we saw Mark Blundell spin in the identical part of the circuit this morning. So Katayama off, but actually the thing I wanted to say for the last 2 minutes is that Coulthard has moved up to 3rd position. David Coulthard, a 1:24.869, and that's just over 1/10 of a second slower than team leader Damon Hill. That's what happened. Ooh, that's a big shunt.
Well, that happened rather quickly indeed for Ukio Katayama. Nosed it and tailed it into the tower wall, and I'm quite certain that all the changes that were made around that segment of the circuit, Ukio Katayama will be very grateful, as will the Tyrrell team.
So, a Ferrari on the provisional pole position, and it's Jean Alesi's Ferrari on the provisional pole position, as it was back in June when we were across the ocean in Canada on Friday. Alesi was fastest there as well. So Alesi a 1:24.620, while our picture went momentarily there. Damon Hill is second fastest, 0.114 slower than the number 27 Ferrari. David Coulthard, well, that's his best performance ever in an official qualifying session. Third, a qualifying session, I'd say. Berger fourth, Hakkinen fifth, Herbert sixth, Frentzen seventh, Irvine eighth, Katayama ninth, and Blundell 10th. That's the situation after 60 minutes on Friday afternoon. But let's look at Saturday afternoon, when everybody will be out to get this man, Jean Alesi, from the provisional pole position and better that 1:24.620. That's the situation here at Monza after 60 minutes of qualifying. The crowd, they love the Ferraris. The crowd's gone wild, and as John said, it'll bring in more people for Saturday qualifying. There's the top 13 with Barrichello with the skin of his teeth just moved into 13th position, only done 8 laps this afternoon. So a good performance from the man that started from pole position in Spa and is 13th here so far. The Cesar is 14th, Verstappen, the fastest Benetton, in 15th, Bernard, Leto, Zanardi, Alboreto and Fittipaldi completing the top 20, while Gasio is the last of the qualifiers, and we have seen only 27 cars out because we're missing Pierluigi Martini altogether here on Friday afternoon. So that is the situation. But John, it's going to be cracking qualifying on Saturday.
Well, I'm looking forward to it very much. Monza, a very special place. Ferrari, of course, here determined to have a lockout on the front row of the grid. Of course, Damon Hill has to win here on Sunday. Pole position, important as it is, it's being first on Sunday that really will count.
So this was Friday qualifying from Monza. Tomorrow we'll be back for the same time, 1 o'clock on the continent, 12 o'clock in the UK, for 60 minutes of final qualifying for the Italian Grand Prix. We'll be back. Join us then. Bye for now.